evening to all the attendees, whoever is here. With that, I think we are ready to start. I think a lot of people have already joined, and I don't want to keep them waiting. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the session. Um, Said Terry Tempest Williams. She was an American writer and activist. That stories have the power to create social change and impact community. Stories in the form of pop culture have taken an even more powerful form. For instance, in our own Indian cinema, if you look at a film like Bal Yogini, which spoke about widow remarriage, to Mother India, that reflected on the plight of farmers, to the more recent Lust Stories or Vicky Donor, Indian cinema has come a long way as a part of literary expression to bring forth social issues. Likewise, we also have theatre, which is also an artistic form of literature that reflects on society and the times that we live in. While theatre talks more directly to people than any other art form, it has always incorporated public expression, and that's why it's also a very popular literary expression which we all love. So if you see theatrical magnum opuses like The Vagina Monologue or The Death of a Salesman, these theatre really makes it easier to fathom complex issues like this or talk about taboo topics. And of course, before the advent of visual storytelling, there were and still are good old books, even in the contemporary times. Like we have authors like Aravind Adiga and Arundhati Roy, V.S. Naipaul, all these authors who brought out the nuances of societal issues in memorable prose. Now, through all these, literary forms of expression or pop culture, we have seen a lot of issues or problems of society see light today. They've brought out really beautifully, like whether it's poverty or caste system, women issues, partition, political injustice, all these have been already catered to through literature. But the one issue that has recently literally popped up in pop culture is the serious and critical issue of child sex abuse. I think till about 15 years ago, CSA was still a taboo topic, but we had the likes of NGOs like Arpan, we had activists like Harish Iyer, authors like Pinky Virani, because of whom the issue started to garner more attention, a lot of media attention as well, and people started to understand how critical and how grave it is. And thankfully, we have socially conscious professionals like our panelists today who are also using the medium of literature, art, and the power of storytelling to spread awareness about child sex abuse. So with that, I would like to welcome you all to this panel discussion on pop the culture, the role of pop culture like books, theaters, and films in creating awareness of social causes like child sex abuse. Today, we are going to talk about how we can literally pop that culture or bust that culture of CSA purely by prevention and awareness, and what is the role that literature has played towards this cause. Our panel is today, a part of this fantastic initiative called Child Safety Week, supported by ARPAN. And we really thank our panelists for joining us. We have with us filmmaker Onir, sexuality educator Anju Kish, and lawyer Dr. Deborah T. Haldar with us. Give me a few minutes to introduce each of them to you because they have done such commendable work in their respective fields that they deserve a couple of minutes of attention. I begin in the alphabetical order. Onir is an award-winning filmmaker, producer, screenwriter, and editor. He's best known for his film, My Brother Nikhil, which was one of the first mainstream Hindi films to deal with AIDS and same-sex relationships. He won the Indian National Film Award for the best film for the anthology I Am in 2011. It is considered to be one of the first and largest crowd-funded films through social media in India, and we are going to discuss this a little more in the panel discussion. It dealt with single motherhood, child sex abuse, and LGBTQI rights and displacement. Born as Anirban Dhar in Bhutan, Onir studied comparative literature and went to study film editing in Berlin. He later returned to India and worked as editor, scriptwriter, art director, and with Sanjay Suri, he started his Anti-Clock Film, his production company. His latest release was Kuch Bhige Alfaz, which is currently streaming on Netflix. So welcome, Honor, and thank you for being a part of the panel today.
Thank
So
you, Payal,
honored,
for the kind introduction. Thank you.
so honored to have you. Next with us, we have Anju Kish. She is a certified sexuality educator, and founded the company dedicated to sexuality and safety education called Untaboo in 2011 again. She is a four-time TEDx speaker and the author of the best-selling book on puberty, sex, and growing up for children, titled How I Got My Belly Button. It's a pretty cute title, I feel, Anju. In fact, it also bagged the Best Children's Book of the Year award in 2019. So, congratulations for that. She's a producer of a critically acclaimed play on puberty and safety called Growing Up, which again we're going to discuss a little more in detail. A change maker and entrepreneur, her name is synonymous to sex ed in our country, and she has been covered by top media houses like Wall Street Journal, Financial Express, India Today, and the likes. She's also the Times of India Women of Substance awardee. So that's Anju Kish for you. Anju, welcome to the panel today. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And last, of course, but not the least, we have Professor Dr. Devarati Haldar. She is the Honorary Managing Director of Center for Cyber Victim Counseling, an online not-for-profit organization that counsels the victims of cyber crimes. She's presently working in United World School of Law, Kannavati University, and she has won the Web Wonder Women Award by Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, Government of India, and Twitter, and the Tech Next India Best Faculty of the Year Award by Computer Society of India in 2019 for her work on cyber law and creating awareness on cyber crimes against women, a very important issue to deal with today. Dr. Haldar is also an independent legal researcher and has authored 5 books and edited 1 book, including Child Sexual Abuse and Protection Laws in India, published by SAGE. She also served as Vice President for Kids and Teens Division for working to halt online abuse from 2008 to 2015. So again, welcome Devarati, and really honored to have you as well with us. And I am the host and moderator of today's session, Payal Shah Karwa, author of the book The Bad Touch and a content professional. Bad Touch was dedicated to real life thrivers like Harish and to spread awareness about child sex abuse. So again, welcome to the panel, and let's hope for a fantastic discussion. We're going to first address Devarati with her questions because unfortunately she has to leave because of health reasons. So Devarati, the first question here is for you. Your book on the protection laws of child sex abuse. What was your journey? How did you manage to write it, and what inspired you?
Okay. See, as you have just mentioned that I was the Vice President of Kids and Teens Division, working to halt online abuse. My association with researches on cyber law, on criminal law, etc., started long back. And I think probably 2 decades back. I mean, the criminal law and all these things. And thereafter, slowly I shifted to cyber law and especially criminal aspect of the cyber law. Now, what happened is that when I was doing my research and then thereafter as a practitioner also, I did get to see there were lots of cases coming up. And not only that, the children basically and the parents, they did not know that how to manage the entire handling of the case. So, for example, as you have written the work, I mean, I was just going through the information about this bad touch. I work on bad talk, and good talk. What happens when you go for the online platforms, you often get to see that the freedom of speech and expression is something which is hugely abused. So when I was working to halt online abuse, I did get to see lots of teens contacting, but they were not from India. Mostly they were either from US or from UK, like, the Western Hemisphere. And therefore, I mean, I decided that no, we should do something for India also. And I I created the Center for Cyber Victim Counseling, which is an NGO. And obviously, I did not expect that the children will contact me or the parents will contact me, because I knew that at that time in 2009, it was still a taboo for talking about online child sexual abuse. But I did get to see that there were lots of issues coming up. So I decided that, because one time I saw that the laws were not clear, even though we have got the settled laws, the laws were not clear. The parents did not know what to do. And thereafter, the police, obviously, I'm considered I'm invited as a trainer for lots of government institutions also. And there, the police kept on asking me only one question. The police personnel kept on asking me only one question. When a child comes to us, you are telling that we have to follow the confidentiality issues as has been mandated in the JJ Act. At that time, POXO was not there, and also IPC was not that developed. So you are telling us to not to go for confidentiality breaking, etc. But then how do we communicate with the child? So this was one thing that I decided that no, something should be done on this. And there were other organizations also I know that who are doing work on physical child sexual abuse, and they were also communicating with us. And we were, I mean, still now we are a very good group where, we collaborated with each other. And when I also got to hear from them that, one time when the child sexual abuse happens on the physical space, almost like, simultaneously this comes up on the internet. Either the child is trying to hide from the actual abuser, and then he or she is coming to the online platform, and the perpetrator is trying to find the child out. And this is what happens, especially when physical bullying or physical sexual abuse turns into physical, sexual bullying or sexual abuse, and the perpetrator tries to stop the child on the internet and then starts the online sexual abuse. It can include even sextortion also. So then I decided that something should be done. And then I decided to start first, write my blogs. And when I started writing my blogs, I saw that they are being accepted by the people. Then as a researcher, as a academic person, and also as a practitioner, I started writing lots of academic articles. I started publishing them. And then I decided that let me concentrate on a manuscript. Let me build up a particular, what should I say, an idea. And then I got introduced to another, concept in the legal jurisprudence, which is called as therapeutic jurisprudence. And this therapeutic jurisprudence is something which is connected with the mental health laws. So then I also applied this therapeutic jurisprudence in my practical sense, and I also penned it down. So this was basically the entire idea that I should create something which will be having a holistic idea about what is child sexual abuse, what is online version of the child sexual abuse, and thereafter how the laws are being executed, what are the laws, how the laws are being executed, and then what are the implications of this execution of the laws. What happens is that when a parent comes to me, or when a parent or the child, they come to me, they contact me, they say that we know the laws are there, we know that everything is there, but you tell me that the police will not find us out, even though the child is victim. Then I decided that if something is documented, then the parents will come to know that when we are searching for the medicines, we are searching for the healing things before we go to the doctor for checking what has happened. I wanted that my entire what should I say, research, that should be considered as that kind of should be giving some kind of healing effect before the person can decide that what am I going to do. Obviously they have to go for the reporting authorities, obviously they have to report the matter, but before that they should know that what sort of rights we have. This was the basic idea before I basically penned down the book.
So, Devarati, this literature is available for parents and guardians and adults to refer to, and later on we will definitely share where it is. But if you can just quickly share the links with us, we will send it to our audience, and
Yes.
also tell how they can access it, easily. So, in case they want to refer to,
may I share the screen?
Okay, it will be a little difficult, Devarati,
Okay,
but
no
what
problem.
you can share with us, and we will,
sure.
with our participants, we definitely will. So that brings me to the question, Devarati, that at least for now, if you can just tell us, educate us, what are the first few things that an adult or a parent or a guardian should keep in mind with reference to the laws when they come across an incident? So one will be a preventive thing, like how do you prevent? And one, if you can give a prescriptive idea, about the Indian laws.
Okay. The preventive thing that I first would be talking about, two things that I want to say. One is that about the physical sexual abuse. The other is that online sexual abuse. Let me first start with the physical sexual abuse because all of us are working on this. When a child comes up with some kinds of complaints or some kind of plea that somebody has as you have correctly pointed out, all of the esteemed panelists, that bad touch has happened, please consider what is the bad talk that has happened also, because even if you consider POXO Act, if you consider Indian Penal Code, or if you consider Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, any other law in that fashion, because these three, especially POXO and JJ Act, they are considered, they are focused on the ways of child sexual abuse, the patterns of child sexual abuse, and how to prevent. Other than that, Indian Penal Code, Indecent Representation of Women Prevention Act, Child Trafficking, etc. There are so many other laws are there. Every law in this country, and also if you see from the international perspective also, all of them say that it is the bad touch and the bad talk which combined together make a child sexual abuse case. Now, what is this bad touch? We all know about this. Only when the child feels that, no, I mean, not only, sorry for, excuse me for this, only when the child feels that this is not wanted and somehow that this is something which is crossing the limits, this should be considered as a bad touch. I mean, obviously all of you know that what I mean, that because the law prohibits it. So when the child comes up to the parents to say that this thing has happened, please consider it very seriously and do not blame the child, and try to get the information from the child, then immediately try to reach out to the police. Do not try to reach out to the mediator, who are not the government officials, who are not the stake, the what you call the government or the non-government stakeholders. However, if you're going to the NGO also, I'm talking about the physical sexual assault, do not go for those kinds of NGOs who will try to get name and fame out of that, what you call traumatizing effect of the child. Please never do it. And the second thing is that we have to consider all these laws basically speak about the confidentiality, privacy of the child. That is the reason all NGOs who are working on this, the police officials, etc., it is our duty that we are not going to talk about the child, we are not going to talk about the the locality, parents, schools, etc., of the child, but we are going to reach out to the police, we are going to reach out to the proper investigative agency to find out who the person is who has done this. For this, I would like to share one small case, which was a reported case, and therefore I don't have any problem in sharing it with any one of you. This has happened in one of the southern states. Many of you probably know about it, where the child was deaf and dumb, and she was being abused by an adult for 6 months. She could not communicate, but she could communicate only with her elder sister. When the case was communicated, even the police could understand, obviously with some very noted NGOs, they could communicate with the child, they could find out who the person is, and the person is finally got arrested, and he has also been charged, prosecuted, he's in the prison. Which means that how old the case may be, if it is a genuine case, and if the child is given proper care and protection, definitely the perpetrator can be arrested. Coming to the online child sexual abuse, in such cases, the child will not be telling anything as such that, this has happened to me, until and unless the child got to see the consequence. For the physical child sexual abuse cases, you do get to see when touch has happened, but, penetrative sexual assault may not has happened, or even when the bad touch, that means the threatening, talks, etc., have started, the child might come back to the parents and then they can say. But in online sexual abuse, in my experience, I have seen that, there are 2-3 kinds or patterns of child sexual abuse. Like, for example, somebody has morphed the picture and has posted it, and the child did not know anything. Or in certain cases, you would also get to see that the child has been vigorously sexually bullied, in the peer group, etc. And the child is coming back to the parents, the caregivers, the guardians, etc., when the entire effect has been, very well absorbed by the child, and now he or she cannot anymore accept it. In certain other cases, I have seen that the parents or guardians or the third party has basically come to know that the child has been victimized, but the child has not come to know about it. It's like the child is basically completely innocent victim. So in all 3 cases, what we have to do is that, first of all, we have to consider which platform the entire sexual abuse has happened. And the second thing is that we have to first go and report to that particular platform, because it has been unanimously accepted, be it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even on search engines like Google. Suppose, for example, anywhere, if it is a private domain, but the like search engine has pulled it up, that the particular sexual offensive contents have been pulled up, we have to first knock their door. And obviously the police also must be alerted about this. Here also, like as I mentioned about the physical sexual abuse violence, do not concentrate or do not bring in any sort of mediator who would not be respecting the child rights. In child sexual online sexual abuse cases also, I always urge, and it is seen in my blogs, I mean, I have put it in my blogs and my book also, which is published by Sage, and that is available on the online platforms also. What I always say is that please do not consider going to the hackers. The person can come and say that I am an ethical hacker, but the person can be an unethical hacker, the person can be an amateur hacker, the person can be something which is the professional entertainment hacker, whatever name you say. But this is something which is absolutely an illegal activity. If you see from the Information Technology Act, if you see from the Indian Penal Code Act also. And this something which I have understood from my 20 years of practical understanding, practice experience, and also as a professor, researcher. So this is what something I would like to urge to all parents, through this platform also. If a child has undergone any sort of sexual abuse, online sexual abuse, and it can be mild, it can be the extreme format, please do not go for any hacker. Please neither take it in your own hands. Otherwise, we all know about this Meghan Mayer case. If it is not known to other parents, please search Meghan Mayer case and you will come to know that how the parents went inside and then they became the victims. Or even, for example, there are certain examples of Bollywood, some professionals also, where we have got to see that the parents indulged in this and then the entire scenario changed.
So what do they do, Deborah? Should they first go to the police, and where exactly in the police should they go? To whom should they approach?
Yes. See, in my understanding, 3 steps should be taken. The first thing is that whenever you get to see any, I'm talking about the cyber crimes first. If you get to see any online child sexual abuse content, first you have to report the matter to the particular platform considered, that is the website considered.
So how do you report? There is a link, there is a button called report abuse.
Yes.
That's where.
Yes, okay. Yes. That's what I just wanted to, I was going to mention. Sorry. You have to go for each of the pages report abuse button, and then you have to report that particular content. Next is that do not just stop there, because for the child sexual abuse cases, it is something which is international law perspective. If you see, it is universal jurisprudence, or universal one kind of application is there, universal legal application is there, whereby it does not the locus standi of reporting the matter does not rest with only the parent. It rests basically with whoever has seen that particular content. Obviously, after that, when you go to the police, because here also you have to see that reporting the matter to the website does not end your liability. Then you have to go to the police, and in that case, again, most of us have heard about zero FIR, which means that you can report the matter from any police station, from any jurisdiction. So it is best that if you can put a complaint, or for example, you can just mail a particular content, etc. Nowadays, Twitter handles are there, Facebook handles are there, WhatsApp handles are there. Take a screenshot of that particular content page and send it to that concerned police officer. But again, try not to be explicit in understanding and also showcasing that I have done this, because please do consider the face of the child should not be exposed to anybody else. And I would like to conclude with one thing. Please do not forget about Kathua rape case. We all I understand, because I had been, and I am a practitioner, that's why I know. So many of my friends started showing their sympathy with Kathua rape victim. And what they did is that they started showcasing the girl's photograph. Supreme Court suo motu took the cognizance. If you do that, even ignorantly, if you also do that, do remember POCSO Act is going to make you liable for exposing the photo, exposing the appearance, the what do you call
identity of the
yes. Be very careful of not to expose the child, and also be very careful not to expose, this is something which is very, very important, not to expose the harasser. Because if you start data mining the entire harassers this child's photo will also come up. So be very careful. I mean, just if you get to see any page, etc., try to get the link and try to send it to the police. Obviously.
Fantastic. I think we've got some amazing information. And one last question for you
Yes,
is,
sure.
see, online abuse, the use of online media is rampant. We cannot avoid it, especially now with the pandemic. More and more children and even younger children are coming online, and they are going to someday fall victim to any kind of cybercrime. So, how you think in terms of law? Like, how does the law protect our children? What is it that parents need to keep in mind for that?
Okay. Okay. I would like to conclude here with three things. The entire question, I would like to conclude with only three things. Our laws are now becoming updated almost every day on the basis of trending cases. This is number one. So there's no need to worry that we don't have any laws. However, obviously the legal lacunas are there. For example, there are certain offenses are there which are not yet recognized. And you might search my name also. If you go for a data mining, you would get to see that I have basically pinpointed several other incidences. For example, bullying and cyberbullying, they are not yet recognized by law. Trolling, not yet recognized by law. Revenge porn, not yet recognized by law. Deep fake porn, that is not yet recognized by law. But to remember, we do have child sexual abuse related laws. For example, we have got POXO Act, we have got JJ Act, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. So this is that laws are there. Number two, every parent, they must tell the child about the basic child rights. So we have to remember one thing, and the parents also do have to remember one thing. When we talk about the laws, we must also remember that a child is responsible for the other child's safety also. So it's not like that we are considered that my child is a child, that means under 18, and anybody and everybody who comes and harasses the child is always an adult. No. So if I have a male child, or even if I have a female child, it is my responsibility, it is my duty to tell that particular male or female child that when you go to the school or when you go to the society or park, please do not harass any other male or female child, because we have come to see that it can be vice versa also. And that is the reason POXO is basically open for accepting any victim as any gender and also perpetrator as any gender. Number three is that if you see POXO, which is a very dedicated and very strong law, they also say very clearly that whichever form of sexual offense has happened, if any, that's the reason that I said that you and me, we are also responsible for reporting. It's not only for the online child sexual abuse. If anybody comes to see that any sort of child sexual abuse matter is happening, then it is we are responsible for reporting the matter also. Let the police investigate, let the police find out. And please do remember, parents, especially schools also, that if it is an adult, if you try to use your child as a pawn for fixing your neighbor or your enemy, etc., the law is not going to excuse you. But then defamatory charges can come upon you. So it should be a genuine case. But if a child wants to report a matter to the police, and if that case turns out to be something where the child was trying to make a fun of it or prank of it, or the child is not knowing about these things, then the child will not be held liable because of the maturity level of the child. So we have to be very careful about what information we are giving to the child, what information we are giving to the parents, and how we are expecting the parents and the caregivers to execute that information. And number three is that how the child is spreading the awareness to other children and also to other adults. For this, I would like to mention to everyone who are on this platform, especially through your work, I mean, especially to Anit sir and also to Anju and also to Payal ma'am, that, whenever you are talking with, whenever you're creating any content or whenever you're talking with any person, please tell the child, I mean, please share this, that so that the child becomes the, what should I say, really the teacher of the teachers. That there is this old saying is that the child is the father of the the entire society or human generation. So I would also like to share this thing, and I would like to conclude this thing. There is a wonderful way to connect and reconnect. What happens in such case, if there is anybody is having their grandparents, because now pandemic situation, we are connected with our parents,
Right.
grandparents also. Tell the child to tell the grandparent, that these are the online things that I have learned. so that the grandfather or the grandmother, even if they're not cyber smart, they would get to know that what the child is doing. So in between, if the parents are busy, the parents, the grandparents will be having a very good connection with the child, and they can have
Right.
a good protection, net.
Right. These are some fantastic tips, Devrati, you have shared, and I'm sure the audience has taken home a lot of tips from you. If you can later on, before you leave, whenever you can just chat in the chat box, you can put the links where parents can find these laws, maybe
Yeah.
even your books, so we can share with the audience, so they will have a reference. And we have your email ID. So to all the people out there, we are definitely going to share Devrati's email address. So if you need any kind of counseling or any kind of legal help, I'm sure she'll be very, very kind to help you or at least guide you
Sure.
through. Because
Sure.
I think law is one of the ways to curb and prevent CSA. So thank you so much for joining us and giving us
Thank you.
all this information. Even I wasn't aware. And because the law is changing every day, we need to be updated.
Yeah,
So I urge all the parents, guardians out there, just please take note of the points. We'll also be sharing this with you, and also the links we'll be sharing with you.
I have a question for Debarati, actually.
Sure.
Yes.
Debarati, we face this all the time, parents asking us this, and I think you'd be the best person to answer this. That, the bad touch or not okay touch or unsafe touch, as we call it, it happens across society today. And a lot of times children are the perpetrators themselves. Now, in that case, when is the time to go to the police? Because the person who's done this is also a child. So what should be the first step? Should the first step be counseling of their child? Should it be just talking to the parents or the child? What should be the first step?
Okay. The thing is that, irrespective of who does this offense, whenever any child is coming and telling, that some kind of sexual abuse has happened with me, and even if the perpetrator is under 18, that means the perpetrator can be anybody from the age group of, I'm telling 10, if we have to accept the fact, to 16, even younger than that also. I have seen that the children have done these things. So obviously, because the reason may differ, but there can be things are happening. Now, suppose, for example, because the JJ Act and also the POCSO Act, especially the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, it has given us basically age slab. So age slab means, suppose, for example, if the child is from the 0 to 10 years or 0 to 8 years, I would rather say 8, also no 10 years, because in such cases, I was also the person who was one of the contributors for amendment of the law of so many other legal amendment teams. I was there. Now, from 0 to 8 years, what happens is that the maturity level of the child is not that huge. What happens is that, since all three of you have worked on these things, the child either might have some sexual pleasure, which is connected with his nerves, his brain, his hormones, etc. And thereby, just to enjoy that particular pleasure, the child might be enjoying, doing it again and again. He does not know the consequence of such this thing. He does not know the consequence of what he's doing. But what happens is that after that age of 8 or 9, then comes the next slab, where that means from the that twine age to the adolescent age the child is entering. So this can be from 9, 10 to, it can go up to 15, 14. I would rather say 14. Now this twine to teen age, this is something which is very vulnerable, because now the child will be getting to get addicted to the behaviors that he has already shown, and in certain cases he might also be knowing about the consequence of what he is going to do. That means he would know that how to threaten the victim. He would know that how to post it on the online space also. That means click a picture and do it. He would also know how to erase or how to delete the evidence also, even if it is what should I say, the physical thing. That means that he knows that how to kill the victim. He knows that how to physically harm the victim, so that maim the victim, so that the victim will never come up. The next slab is obviously from the age group of 14, 15, I would not say 14, 15, but rather 16 to 18. Now this 16 to 18 is very, very important, because the JJ Act has very clearly stated that if any child belonging to the 16 to 18 commits any heinous offense, again here you have to see the slabbing of the offenses also: petty offense, serious offense, heinous offense. And these offenses basically are connected with the punishment that are prescribed by the laws. So heinous offense basically they include, say for example, rape, penetrative sexual assault, non-penetrative sexual assault, but sexual assault which can be like aggravated sexual assault, for example, gang sexual assault, etc. And in certain cases, sexual harassment, which will be including even cyber sexual harassment also. That means morphing the pictures and then sharing it with the group, then including that particular picture or indulging that particular picture in online trafficking of the child, etc. These can all happen, because in such cases, if you see the prescriptive sentences, none of these will be having the jail sentence below 5 to 3 years. I mean, maximum it will go to life imprisonment, or the minimum it will come down to 7 years imprisonment. What will happen is that even if he is a child, so if that I'm coming from the last slide, 16 to 18, in certain cases I have seen that the sessions court especially, they have decided that the child, when he is 16 to 18, he may be considered as an adult and he would be treated like an adult. Obviously, in such cases, again, the maturity level of the child will be considered, and at that same case, similar time simultaneously, the child's what should I say, vulnerability, that means how far he is going to contact his that negative peer group, that will also be seen. So bail will be cancelled. There would be no question of leaving the child with the parents. He would be detained, and this detention will be obviously in the child centric home. So we call it as a special home, especially when the child is coming in that last segment, that is from 17 to 18, or even 17 to 19. That means 18 crossed, but he's not yet 20. So he is going to that particular thing. When the child is in the middle, that means from the teenager to the last segments of the teenager, even at that time also, if the child, that is a victim, comes and says that yes, I have been abused by another teen, he can be similar age, or he can be lower than the age, or he can be senior than the age, and the victim can be anybody, that is a female, male, or even a third gender child. So in such case also, the police reporting is a must, because we have seen that once the police report is done, the child will be taken into custody, and this case will be going to the Juvenile Justice Board. The other cases will also go to Juvenile Justice Board, but depending upon the gravity of the offense, maturity of the offense, it can go to the special children's court is there under the POCSO Act also. And in other cases also, if it is the sexual offense, same thing, the special courts can look into. But then the special court will decide that okay, the child's age is a lesser age, that means he is under 16, and he can be guided, etc. So depending upon the harm that has been committed, that means the consequence, the gravity of the consequence, the maturity level of the child, the behavioral pattern of the child, and so very, very important is that lifestyle of the parents. Depending upon all these things, the child may be given bail, but at the same time, the child may be kept under complete monitoring. And this monitoring is not on the child alone. The monitoring is basically on the parents also. That means we don't have this restraining order like the UK or the US or the Australia. Monitoring order will also see that the child does not get to access certain contents, which will be content means even the narco this things also, drugs, etc., which will be pushing the child to commit again that kind of sexual activity. So in all such cases, definitely the victim and the families, they can after you have understood all these things, the victim can definitely report the matter to the police. And at the first instance, I would rather suggest, why? Because again, I'm telling, whether it is a child or whether it is a young adult, that means from 19 to 20 group, you cannot believe at this age that the child, that is the perpetrator child, will be sitting quiet, and he will be telling that no, I have committed the offense. He has got all possible opportunities to destroy the evidence. Right. We have seen that, right? So it is for the benefit of the perpetrator, for the benefit of the victim, that we have to go to the police. Here again, a small thing that I would also like to share is that if you go to the police station, please do remember, every police station has got a juvenile police unit. Even in the rural police department also, they have got a juvenile police unit, and mostly this juvenile police unit is considered by consisted of or includes women police officers. And in certain cases, male police officers are also there. That is not it is not something which is gender specific, not like that. But women are considered as the better police elements for this juvenile crimes. So whenever you go to any police station, you have to tell to the police, in charge of that particular police station, and they will immediately consider that, okay, this is a juvenile related crime, and therefore we are going to give complete confidentiality to both the perpetrator and the victim, and therefore we would go ahead with the legal things.
So Devavruti, what I'm getting from here is that there are laws, okay, that have been constructed specifically probably in the recent times. I think it's about the awareness, and all parents should take note, guardians should take note. And maybe I think it's time to maybe make a film also, which will express all these laws and rules. So Onir, coming to you, whatever Devavruti has said today and enlightened us about the laws, do you think that there is an opportunity to take this information and express it through storytelling, maybe a film or something tomorrow? I mean, what do you think of filmmaking? You've already made I Am, which is, one of the most fantastic, one of the few films that was made on CSA. It won 16 awards, a national award as well. And it must have been a very difficult journey for you. So can you tell us a little about I Am, and then we can maybe talk about probably a next project where you can talk about the laws of CSA.
First of all, Devabhrati, thank you for, it was really, really interesting listening to all the information, knowing what all is available, even as a storyteller, since that was your question, is that all these things are accessible, yet more often, like when you look at news, when you look at what is happening around, nothing is accessed. The way it's treated, it's appalling. And especially now when one knows that all this laws are available, but mostly misused or not used. The journey of I Am, I think, was like, in a way, I wanted to make this film on child sexual abuse because it was something very close to me. Like I wanted to ideally make a feature film, but uh, getting finances have always been difficult for any of the stories that one wants to tell, which is not considered to be commercial. And I'll be honest, actually, even after I've been working on a script for the last 4 years, which is a feature film which deals with child sexual abuse. And it's been 4 years, and all I've heard is from be it studios, be it platforms, it's that, oh, it's not quote unquote. The problem is, unfortunately, most platforms look at cinema as entertainment.
That's right.
They do not, what I see, and I believe that it is really sad, especially now when cinema is so dependent on finance with either platforms or studios, because for them it is business, it is eyeballs.
Right.
If there has to be some message, it has to be entertaining.
That's
okay,
right.
and I find it very disturbing to think of CSA as entertaining. How do you even you keep that word in your mind while writing or structuring? Because when you're making something which is quote unquote entertaining, then your approach has to be a certain populist way,
Right.
that you create a certain kind of drama. And I feel that if I have to be honest to the subject, you cannot really keep that word in your mind, because it is something that is horrific. How can it be entertaining? It can be enlightening. It can be something that moves you, touches you. And I don't, and I always believe that cinema is much beyond entertainment. It has the power. And, you have the advantage in countries like European countries, in Canada, in the US, where there's the availability of film funds from the state, where you can, work on subjects like this. And unfortunately, in India, that's become smaller and smaller and smaller. And with, in India, when you look at films like, suppose today we talk of domestic abuse and we talk of Thappad, okay, but it still falls under the space of what is entertaining, okay, and very often still problematic.
Right.
If you really delve into, because it's trying to fit into the populist space of what the majority is still willing to accept.
That's right.
And unfortunately, when you're dealing with, be it queer rights, okay, be it child sexual abuse, and be it largely anything to do with also how women are portrayed,
Right.
populist is not something that is essential. I mean, I don't like to use the word right, wrong, but that's what I mean. It is not essentially what is correct, what is healthy. You know,
Right.
so when I was making I wanted to make I Am Abhimanyu as a full film. It was inspired by real life stories, and one of the persons, Harish Iyer. I mean, I remember sitting with him and just chatting with him about, his experience. And there was another friend of mine who didn't want to be named. That's why I did, who also experienced. But for me, I think what was very, very, the need was so much that when I thought that let me just try, because there was no platform, crowdsourcing platform at that point. But
Right.
I thought, okay, let me put up on my Facebook that, okay, I want to make this film. This is the outline. And if you believe this film needs to be made, then you can support me financially or also volunteer and work. And the first check that came in was of 2000 from a student in Pune who wrote that I have been abused and I feel that this film will give a voice to whatever I've not spoken for years.
Right.
Please make this film. And when that 2000 came, I felt that this film would happen. It really gave me that confidence,
Right.
that 2000. And for me, what was really, really, it was difficult also because I'm not a counselor. I'm not someone who actually is, I don't have the knowledge that Demobrati has right now to, speak about the subject with so much of, but there used to be so many men, women who came to my office, rather than just do a bank transfer
Right.
or send a check because they wanted to talk. And they would sit in
Right.
front of me, say that they've never spoken for 20 years, 25 years of
Wow.
their abuse, and they would just sit and cry. And it was very difficult because I didn't really know what to say. And then at one point, I realized that I did not really need to say anything. They just
Right.
needed someone to listen to their
Listen.
story without judging.
Right.
So, and post having made that film, also the number of emails, messages, so many people telling me this is my story. That one realizes that one how a powerful medium of cinema is not being used to its potential.
Right.
And just like what again Debabrati was saying, that it is very important also when one is making a film like this, how not to be exploitative while portraying, because I
Right.
have seen films, when it comes to how rape, okay, or even child abuse, though there are very few on child abuse, that the way the films are made, it's very often it the camera is perpetuating the abuse. you
Right.
know so
Right.
your audience,
Right.
largely male, which and it's dangerous, then kind of almost enjoys. In this, I remember
Right.
one of the first ever film that I worked on was a film called Daman,
Hmm.
which was on marital rape, and I was helping the director to distribute the film. And
Hmm.
at that time, there were various, small distributors for various reasons. And I remember very often being asked by the distributors, "अच्छा खाली एक ही रेप है
Oh.
और वो भी husband किया
Oh.
और कोई रेप नहीं है फिर." So
Such.
so at the, I mean, we of course have grown from that society to what that was, 2000.
Right.
But still, there is a lot of people out there who look at abuse, and that is the reason why there is so much of abuse that makes space in WhatsApp, in darknet,
Right.
and all kinds of spaces, because people actually participate. So as a filmmaker, one has to be very, very careful, and that was one reason why I wanted my film to be the survivor to be a male survivor,
Right.
because mostly one people have this misconception that it's
Right.
only the girl child,
Right. That's
okay,
right.
but almost equal percentage of male,
Abuse.
boys are abused. One, two, then the male in the audience, you know, don't participate. It starts making them, the men feel uneasy,
That's
and
right.
it makes them perhaps also think to maybe what has happened in their life, what is their experience, or what they might themselves be participating in.
Right.
So that was a very conscious thing. And the third conscious thing was to not show the act.
Right.
You show before and after, because you don't need to see the act to understand the horror of what it is.
Okay.
Because I feel that very often when this kind of sexual abuse is shown, be it man, be it a child or a woman,
Right.
it is very problematic, because it is, quote unquote, the way it's shown is entertainment, and that has to be, I mean, one as a filmmaker, one has to be very, very careful about that.
Right. There has to be a very fine balance because at the end of the day, it can just antagonize, especially the people who have gone through that, and it will just relive their pain. And it's very painful because I remember when I was writing my book, there were so many people I approached who I knew, but that they have been victims to this. But for some of them, it was very difficult. Some of them actually flatly refused. Sorry, I don't think I'll be able to talk about this. So but still hats off to you for attempting, because the fact that people actually came and opened up to you, it gave them that sounding board. I think that was enough. I think it just made that effort worth it, and I think we really, really need more such efforts from people like you. So I hope you continue doing that, and we will talk a little more about the film. But just like you made a film, Anju, coming to you, you have been in this space for over a decade, and you have done so much work around it. And you work primarily with children and preteens, I believe. And I think that's also very difficult, TG, because at least parents, you can make them understand. But to talk to children, in a very sensitive way, that's also as sensitive or as difficult as making a film like Onir did, to talk to them in their language. So you have used the medium of theater as a literary expression, as a pop culture medium. So would you like to tell us two things about it? I would like to know, we would like to know is, one is what are overall the content of the play, and what are the three things that a parent or a guardian should take back from the play that you have made? Please tell us a little more about it.
Sure. So I think before I even tell you that, I just like to state that as being a sex educator in this country is the most difficult job, I think. Or when you talk about sex education, is the most difficult thing. It's a deterrent because of the word sex in it. So similarly, for when you say that it's easy to talk to parents, actually it's not. It's easier to talk to children, I feel. They are more accepting, they are more open. The parents are the one with have blinders, which have these fixated ideas about even talking to their child. So I think even as a parent, if they'd be more open to, probably if you offer them a program on child safety awareness rather than a child sexual abuse awareness. Because the moment this word sex or sexuality or anything related to it comes, the parents' alarm bells start ringing and they completely reject this idea.
Right.
So over the course of my work, I found that what helped parents get over this inhibition of this word is humor. Humor helped them tide over their embarrassment. It helped them shed inhibitions. And once they shed those inhibitions, they were more open to listening to what you had to say. And once they listened to what you had to say, they realized the importance of what you are saying. And then acceptance became more easy. So like Onir was saying, that messaging has to be entertaining. I absolutely agree with him. And this is something we at Untaboo decided right from very early on in my journey in this field, is that our messaging will be entertaining. It's not going to take away from the impact, but it will be definitely entertaining because it will be more accepted that ways. Now, with that in mind, whatever work we do, whether it is workshop with children, we deal not just with preteens, we deal with kids as young as 5 up to 21. So, and of course, parents also. So whatever work we do, whether workshops, whether the book I wrote, whether the play that I did, and I'll come to that in a moment, everything is very in a fun manner, and it is very, very impactful at the same time. Now, the play was done because I realized that parents wanted an opening where they could have these conversations with their children. We were doing workshops with children, but the parents found that they couldn't take that forward at home. Of course, we would involve the parents in the workshop. We would, try and break the ice, but it wasn't enough. So we said, okay, where do we bring these two people together, the child and the parent, so that the ice between them gets broken? Because these talks are not one-time talks. They have to be carried forward at home. They are continuous talks across different developmental stages of their life. And thus the idea of a play came about. Now, when we did this play, again, humor had to be a part of it. And this play, Growing Up, it's a play on puberty and safety, and it is a complete laugh riot. It showcases the adults' hesitation about talking about things as simple as our body parts. Right? I mean, if we all think about it, we don't talk about body parts to our children. We don't talk about the genitals to our children. We talk about all body parts except genitals. We don't even call it by the right name. We give them pet names like nunus and bibis and even more creative ones.
Right.
So we had to break that ice. We have to get that over. And that's how this play was conceptualized. It's a laugh riot. It's got some 6 or 7 songs in it. So it's almost a musical.
Oh, lovely.
And it's in a story format. It's the story of 4 young kids who are struggling with puberty, with the physical changes they're undergoing, emotional changes, mood swings, crashes. They're confused and there's nobody to answer their questions. The only thing they have is a book on growing up, which has a clown on it. Because the kids are not asking questions, this book has become blank. All the pages have turned blank. The clown has disappeared. And he says he will only come back when they start asking questions.
Okay.
So they start, and then the kids realize that as they ask questions openly, the clown appears and answers those questions. So it was a message to the kids also that, don't just keep it in your mind, openly ask. It is normal to ask. And it was a learning for the parent that the kids have a lot of questions and be that source of information for the child rather than them going to these unreliable sources and developing wrong attitudes.
Correct.
Of course, the first half of the play is completely on puberty. The second half is a lot on safety. So it's a complete play on puberty and safety.
So what are the few things that you've highlighted about CSA and safety, personal safety? What are the things that parents should keep in mind?
Right. I think we've spoken about a lot of things, and some of the more common, the ones which I can think of right away are that CSA can happen by not just a stranger, but by even a person known to you. And in most of the cases, statistics say that abuse is by a person known to the child. It happens across all strata of society. It's not that it happens in the economically lower part of the society. It happens across all kinds of people. It happens to both boys and girls, and it is okay to say no. Even if it is a person known to you, that you should have the courage to say no. You should report it to an adult. Also, we've spoken about stranger danger there. Now, this is a term we commonly tell our kids, stranger danger. But we've also passed on the message that all strangers are not bad. You should learn to identify that, and you should be vigilant about the fact that they are still strangers. One very important thing we've highlighted in this play, and which again we speak to parents about very often, that it is not right to put the onus on the child to be safe.
Right.
As a parent, we have these conversations with our children about the good touch, bad touch, safe touch, unsafe touch, whatever terminology you give to this talk. We talk to our children, tell them if something like this happens, probably scream or run away, and then come and tell a parent. But it is not always possible for the child to scream or run away from that situation at that point of time.
Very true.
Very true. Yeah. So basically what we've done is we put the onus on the child that, hey, this is what you got to do. You need to learn to protect yourself. Rather than that, we have to give scenarios to a child that if something like this happens, for example, you're the last person on the bus and, probably the conductor there touches you, what are the possible things you can do? Or if you're at home and a teacher has come home and he or she is touching you and there's nobody at home, what can you do? Give them scenarios, help them develop those skills of what to do in situations like this. And that's what through the play we've also tried to do that. We've given them a few situations and help the children devise ways of what they can possibly do.
Okay. So what I'm getting is that, especially this is for parents. As a parent, I'm saying that while it might, a lot of parents are not comfortable, as you rightly said, Anju, to talk to their children. But this is the right age to make them aware if you have to curb the issue. It can't be, you can't wait for years till something happens and then they come back after 20 years and they cry, like, a lot of people came to honor and then they cry that, they wanted to just vent out because this affects their life, right from it's childhood trauma. Most of the issues we have today, including mental health issues, are because of childhood trauma, so this is a very traumatic experience which stays with a child. Children do not forget it. We as parents feel that acha bahut chota hai, choti hai, bhul jayenge bacche, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It stays with them throughout. So we have to be extremely careful if we are not comfortable as parents to talk. You have books like what Deborati has written, you have plays what Anju has made, we have films like filmmaker like Honor are making. So parents, please make sure that if you feel that you do not want to open the conversation, but I feel parents are actually the right people, but if you yourself want to get oriented and if you want to feel comfortable about it, you should take help of literature in some way or the other to express this to your children. Let them understand in their own language as well. Do not leave it only to schools to educate your children. Please use pop culture. We have very decent amount of pop culture out there, not a lot, but we do have. So you can educate yourself as well and your children too. So having said that, I would like to ask Honor, Anju, and Deborati. First we begin with Honor. That why is pop culture important? Why do you think it is important to spread awareness about a sensitive issue? What is the role that it actually plays according to you?
So I will just diverge a little because I was just thinking while Anju was talking about it and that is something I have also consciously been thinking of how to address in my work, because what all of us are mostly addressing is only very urban and middle class, urban, parents, how they think, how, that kind of a scenario. Because whatever little exposure to rural I've had is one is I feel that one the uh, not talking about the way sex is looked at by middle class is very different from how sex is looked at in rural India.
Mm.
People actually talk about sex much more easily, be it in
Mm.
front of children, because one is also of space, because everything is happening and everyone is around. Okay, one. Two, I think we actually come from a culture which was much more open about sex, because, I remember going at Punarak and I was very amused to see all these families with children, mother, father, all standing while the guide was in detail explaining sexual acts and things, and everyone would just stand and listen, with a smile, and the father, mother, little kid, big kid, everyone together, you know. And I feel that, even if like recently I was traveling in Bishnupur and rural Bengal, and I was seeing that, when you go to a pond, there would be women bathing naked, I mean, half naked, men in the other side. It's not that it's totally, they're separate, but there is eye contact.
Right.
There is much more of openness about sex than what today the moral policing is also. So much of that is happening that wants to believe that as a society, so I feel that also we need to start using a lot more of our mythology, our, go back to the roots of folk culture and mythology to try and tell stories where
Right.
we can address even, child sexual abuse, where we can talk about it
Right.
and start thinking how our narratives can also go to these spaces,
Right.
go beyond spaces of multiplexes, and
Mm.
because now it is also reaching out to big towns and
Right.
through television everywhere.
Right.
How it is important to start speaking a language. I don't mean that, we are too vast a country to be able to speak every language. By language, I don't mean Bengali, Hindi, and all that. What I mean is, the there are different forms of narrative that different, unfortunately, class and background identifies for, and we very often restrict to only one space, and I feel it's increasingly important to, through cinema, and now because of, I mean, even be it Instagram, I think. We looked, when we were all like, for me, it's become very, very important to understand TikTok, to understand Instagram, to
Right.
learn how to do these 2 minutes, 3 minute stories where you
Right.
can talk about everything. So actually, as an experiment, I was trying with my assistant that let's do something on eve teasing for TikTok
Yeah.
and see how you can use that movie, because I think this is important to not look down upon all this. This is what the youngsters are using, and if we want to reach out to this age, which is not only who are survivors or being abused, they can also be abusers. Like just now we discussed that age group, 10 above, can be both. That it is a very important space that needs to be explored,
Right.
explored, that how we can use this medium to tell certain important stories.
That's right. So it's a fantastic point because while in urban we have social media, in rural they're not so much on social or Insta. You'd never find them. But like you rightly pointed out, there might be street theater. They call them Nukkad Nataks, which are a very powerful medium to connect with rural people, and they associate with these things more. Though they're getting on social and digital, but they're not as savvy yet.
I'll just
So
intervene what here. Actually,
yes, yes.
TikTok
Hmm.
was super popular right
Rural.
rural. And one of the things, and why I'm mentioning is, when TikTok was banned in India,
Hmm.
it really also, like, it affected the rural queer population in a huge way, because for them it was one of the only. I mean, if you go to TikTok, you
Hmm.
would see rural young
People.
boys doing romantic songs, and so it was a space of liberation.
Right.
So I feel that social media, especially Facebook and now Reel, and have reached out, has really gone out to the
Gone
youth.
out. That's right. Absolutely. So, having said that, Anju, do you want to, uh, you know, bring some light to how pop culture can, help spread
Right.
awareness and what is the role it plays?
See, I think pop culture or popular culture, as we call it, it it influences us from the moment we are born, right? It plays out in the movies we see, the books we read, even the clothes we wear. So the impact is seen everywhere, especially like Onir was talking with the teenagers.
Hmm.
It helps shape them. In fact, if I can say, go as far as saying that.
Hmm.
So if this is the kind of influence that it has, then we should definitely be using this, using this pop culture to spread awareness of sensitive issues, important issues, CSA, of course, being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to go back to, I think, a few years back, Amir Khan's show Satyamev Jayate,
Right.
he had one episode on good touch, bad touch.
Yes.
Now, parents were talking, schools were talking, maybe not as much as they are now, but they were talking. But that one episode on good touch, bad touch did to spread awareness about, having these talks with the children was vast. What a film like probably Padman did
Hmm.
to opening up conversations on periods, where people are openly talking about it, youngsters are discussing it. I think that's the power of, the pop culture, and we should definitely leverage that for sure.
Right. And how do you think, this is open to all of you, Devati is still here, thank God. How do you think that people in general, parents or the government or society in general can contribute back to making this happen? Because as we all face difficulties in creating content when it comes to CSA. People want more entertainment per se or escapism. But these are issues which cannot go under the carpet anymore. And pop culture is a great way to bring it out and make it relevant. So what is it that society can do? What is it that parents can do to keep this momentum going?
Okay. The thing is that I would like to tell, first thing is that when you are reporting the matter, the first thing is that you have to report the matter. And second thing is that when the reporting of the matter is happening, please do not think that this reporting is considered as the all-in-one medicine for the child. Society has to understand that if the child has been victimized, the child should not be stigmatized, number
Right.
one. And not only the stigmatization, but also the society also needs to understand that the child must also be encouraged to speak up about the child rights, right? Now, what happens in this thing is that when the child is basically being encouraged to, एक minute, just a second.
Sure.
When the child is being encouraged to speak up, at that time also it depends upon the parents, the teachers also to teach that not to pinpoint on any particular harasser, because now comes the question of the rights of the accused also. Basically everything underlying is going on the rights, right? The child right or the accused's right. Because suppose for example, if the person, that is the parents, if the parents basically come to know that my child has been victimized. I am a mother, all of your parents, I know, most of you, even in the participants are also parents. I know that if my child is victimized, I'm not going to leave the harasser. I mean, I'm going to see that he is going to see death. But that does not mean that, I'm going to go off my rights, my duties, I'm going to kill that person. If that happens, then the entire concept of restorative justice will go upside down. So in that case, the society also needs to keep everything open. That means the accused person must also be given the right or what should I say, opportunity to get reformed. Now, obviously here comes the question that how he is going to be reformed. Now there is a something which probably all of you have come to know by now. There was a concept called marrying your rapist. That kind of things
Yeah.
should never be encouraged.
Right.
That means, to put it under the carpet, you do something to the family and then you get lost. That should not be done. But suppose, for example, some sort of mistake, some sort of illegality, criminality has happened. But then the particular person who has done that, he should also be made to understand why he has been, put under behind the bars.
Right.
So obviously here comes the question of the again the practice of therapeutic jurisprudence and also the reformative justice, where I am part of the legal group where we have created a kind of circle, which is called as reformative justice circle or restorative justice circle. And I can tell you, Onir sir, you can be one part of it because you are a storyteller, you are a filmmaker. Even Anju ma'am and also Payal ma'am, because you are all authors. So what you have to do is that bring out the story, bring out the positivity to make the child understand that one thing has happened. With this, you have to go forward. And the other thing is that, but it is again in the cloak of rights, duties, responsibilities, where the parents will come to know that, that revenge taking mentality is now healed down. The thing is that when the victim comes to know that no, this something is there, that that I have a right, I have a duty to better myself. What happens is that the victim actually waits for the opportunity that let me grow up, I will then harm the parents or the family members of the harasser. The society needs to understand that this kind of blood feud should be stopped.
Right.
And I think here comes the great responsibility of the school also, whereby we have seen one thing. I mean, I can't stop myself from telling this, that in the school, two groups are harming each other. That also I have seen. So the school's responsibility is to actually segregate the victim and the perpetrator. But again, here also the school may come up to say that we are rusticating the child. So in that case, again, another question comes up, is that right to education. What will happen to the perpetrator child? Obviously, adult victim, I'm not touching them because we know about their responsibilities, rights, duties, etc. I'm more concerned about the child victims. So in that case, I believe that the children, who are the perpetrators, they should be segregated first of all, and then both both these sectors, that is the units, they should be told what to do, what not to do. But the best thing is that how you are keeping the victim separated from the perpetrator. And here, do not force the child. Especially I have seen that when the child is a little older child, that means 16 to 18, and especially when there had been a question of love, emotional affair, and suddenly POXO has been posed. I mean, POXO has basically posed a big question mark, especially when the girl decided that I'm going to love, I'm going to have some kind of relationship with this man. And even if the boy also and the girl, the woman is older than him, these kinds of things actually have come up. Sorry. So these kinds of things actually have come up. So we have to understand about the emotional well-being of the the victim and the perpetrator also. And at the same time, I think I don't know how you are going to take it up, because I know that all of you are creative persons. If a child who is in the last slab, 16 to 18, we have seen the puppy loves also. If a child says that I love somebody, I think it is the parents who should tell them to wait, not to kill, not to harm anybody, or not to kill that love also. Let the child understand whether it is a wise decision or a wrong decision. So in that way, I think that until and unless it is becoming something which is crossing the limits, like stalking is happening or threatening is happening for physical contact, etc. If it is just the romantic thing, let the child understand whether it is going in a right direction or not. Otherwise it will turn completely upside down. Then we will get to see that the child has become very much rebellious against the parents. So, and
Right.
this is something which I have learned from the films, thanks to people like Onir sir. So I have learned from the films and from my practical experiences. I would like to end this, if time permits, with a small story. I had been a member of child welfare committee in one of the districts in Tamil Nadu, where I have seen that this couples used to come 16, 17, and mostly after the annual exams, after the board exams. And I have seen that the girls were there were female members were there also in the CWC. The girls were told that you have to go to the temple, you have to purify your minds. The boys would be said, no, we are going to send you to JJB, we are going to send you to the criminality. Why? Because they just loved each other. So I think it is the parents who should also be told that concentrate on your child's well-being, and this is something which is very much normal for adolescent behavior. So I think, and you see one thing, that those of us who have our relatives in abroad, we take pride in telling that my daughter is 14, my son is 15, and he has got a girlfriend. In India, even in 2020 November also, if we say that, I mean, I doubt how many parents will leave their children without harming, giving a thapad. So I think that is what society-wise we need to grow up. The parents need to grow up, and then the children should grow up.
That's right. And I think parents, it's not easy being a parent. Right from childhood, we have to make sure that we have to imbibe all these moral values, and somewhere or
Yes.
the other, we keep failing because we ourselves don't know what's right, what's wrong, and we go by what we have been taught. But I think, with the right influence of cinema or books, I think we'll be able to educate ourselves and
Yes.
put our children in the right direction.
Well, if I may just interject here.
Yeah, I was just
we've
going to ask you
spoken-
to
yeah.
add. Yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about, and Deborita has given us, great information about the law. But I think we're concentrating a lot on the fact of perpetrators and victims. We are actually looking at prescriptive measures. We are not even looking and talking about preventive measures in our society today.
Right.
The government has. I think sex education, and I'm bringing this up here not just because I'm a sexuality educator, but because of the fact that this is one way to actually control CSA. Ignorance is not a plea under law, but how do you remove the ignorance of a child if you're not telling them what the law is, if you're not telling them what is sexual abuse? Even as adults, how many of us know that even it's not about just touching a child, but even showing, say, pornographic material to a child comes under CSA? How many of us adults know that, right? So how do you expect a child to know this? We have to have sex education in the school. And please, whoever's listening to this, sex education is not about sex. It's about body positivity, respect, empathy, consent, safety, gender sensitization. It's a crucial part of growing up responsibly, and it's a crucial part of even reducing sexual abuse, and of course leading to a safer society. So I think the government, like what your question earlier was, I think the government should definitely step in here, make this compulsory across schools, because not all parents are comfortable talking about it. Not everybody will send them to an expert, but if it is mandated in schools, it will be a uniform education every child will grow up with, and we will definitely see a change in society. Then we'll
I
definitely be
may
working towards a safer society.
may I please include one thing? In this year, 2020, CBSE has basically included a portion on cyber sexual, violence or cyber safety, etc. So I think that, from your panel or from your side, you can basically push CBSE to make it as a, online module, or a smaller,
Curriculum or compulsory.
Yes. A proposal can be sent so that, because I know that even if CBSE has included or would include, it now completely depends upon the discretion of the schools. And the principal might decide
In
that.
fact, they had the government had initiated a very nice program called AEP, Adolescent Education Program, but
Yes.
unfortunately, I don't think it really picked up. In fact, I always say this, that for change to happen, there are 3 A's which have to be implemented. I think all of us fall under the first A. We all do awareness. But after the awareness, the acceptance has to come from the other party, which is the parent. And then an action needs to be taken. Only when these 3 A's are taken care of, that will actually see the major change happening.
And I think the change should also come from parents themselves. So with that, I'm going to ask the attendees if they have any questions. I think a couple of people have already asked. So there is a Q&A window. We are open to questions for our panelists. Please do ask. Please do ask, sorry. Okay, somebody, I'm just going to read out. So any of you who would like to please take this question up. What are some online spaces, platforms, or organizations where one can find media resources on CSA? So Debarati, do you want to take that? And then maybe Anju and Onir can add.
See, the thing is that you can, the question maker and also all other attendees, obviously the NGOs are there. You can basically find out about the NGOs if you type about, child right related thing. The best online platform you can find is in the UNICEF platform. UNICEF has built enormous resource. And even I am still a part of UNICEF also. Next is that National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Even we have got State Commission for Protection of Child Rights also, but if you visit National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, definitely you can find even better, state-wise, domestic law related resources. UNICEF, basically, you will get to see child-friendly languages there. So that definitely is something which you can definitely follow. Both UNICEF and NCPCR, you can definitely look into it. But however, I would rather suggest that if you have any case, or if you do not want to go to the police and you do not want to report the matter to the police, please do not post your case, or rather I would use the term paste your case in any open resource page. What happens is that, as I mentioned, that the confidentiality, the privacy of the victims also gets affected. So NCPCR and also State Commission for Child Protection of Child Rights, they have given a particular page whereby you can basically put your feedback, and they will be contacting you, that if you have any other questions, or suppose, for example, if you're representing any victim, or if the victim herself or himself, like what we do get to see for 1098. So that you can definitely look in.
That's great. Also, there's one more question. When parents don't show, this is from Anahita Dasul, ma'am. Thank you for attending, ma'am. When parents don't show enough concern about the abuse, is it okay for the teacher to let it be, or should she push the parents to do the needful? I think, Anju, you would be, I think, the right person to answer this, because you're a teacher as well. And you deal with teachers, so yeah.
Yeah, so we do programs on safety, and a lot of times kids in the workshop share, some instances of abuse which has happened to them, whether at home or while playing down in the building. And of course, we bring it to the notice of the parent and the teacher. And if it's in the school, then the teacher concerned. And there are times that the parents don't want to take that action. But yes, definitely it's as an educator, you definitely must have that conversation with the parent, because the messaging you're sending the child is completely changes. If a child has, conveyed to you that the child is being abused and the parent is refusing to take any action, you have silenced that voice of the child. You have told him or her that it is okay to be touched in that manner. You've told that child that your parent is never going to support you, so it's no point going to that parent later on in life. There are lots of messages you have sent that child, and you've scarred that child for life. So definitely an intervention is required, from the educator to the parent, for sure.
Thank you for answering that. Anil, would you like to add anything for our audience and give them some perspective about how cinema can help in preventive measures as well, or prescriptive measures? I think Anil, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I feel that cinema is provides a space which opens up dialogue, between when like I know that like with Arpan they streamed I Am Abhimanyu at many spaces for both parents, I mean children and parents, and together. So it kind of gives a certain, initially there is a little sense of uneasiness. Okay, but the film, since we didn't deal with anything explicit, showed anything, it also gives that comfort to start discourse. So I could show it to also different schools. It was, so
Right.
I feel that cinema is very often when you are a little uneasy to start the discourse. Like for example, I'll give you another very good example. When I made my brother Nikhil, I was invited for a conference of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and I remember being told by the Army general that, okay, this is the Army, we can't talk about homosexuality. You are talking about AIDS and HIV. And then he paused and says, but you are an outsider, so use the opportunity. Okay, so because you're watching the film and then the Q&A happens, so I feel that even in school spaces, various spaces, I've been to a lot of places with these films where it's screened and then a talk. So there's a teacher, there is a student, and I feel that students open up much more easily because one is they feel you have a reference point to start your conversation. You're not directly talking about yourself, you're talking about something else, but very often you know that they're addressing it, through the mask of cinema, through the mask of the other.
That's
And I
right.
think that is what cinema helps. It helps generate conversations without directly making it. If you're uncomfortable about talking about yourself, you're talking about the other, but actually you're asking and answering questions for yourself.
For yourself. So it's powerful storytelling. And I think that's where we have films like The Monsoon Wedding or The Highway, Dear Zindagi. They also touched upon the topics.
Yeah.
We had shows like Satyamev Jayate, and then of course there was Lilith Dubey's play 30 Days in September, if anybody remembers seeing it. Again, it was based on child sex abuse, and Pinky Vinani's Bitter Chocolate. So all these assets that we have, the cinema, films, book, all of these have played a very critical role, and they will continue playing. I think creators like a panelist here, as long as they are dedicated and as long as they are, completely clued into this issue and they have the passion, I think we'll keep getting more and more pop culture to help our children and help our parents understand CSA better and accept it, as Anju said, and take action. So with that, I think we are kind of run out of time, but so happy that all of you were still here and still participating. Thank you so much, Anju, Onir, Debarati, for being a part of the panel and sharing such beautiful insights this evening to our parents. I'm going to request Santosh to put all the resources I think Debarati has shared a lot of resources which parents can access, some books, some links to books, also the email IDs of all the panelists. So Santosh, if you can just put it out on chat, you all are most welcome to connect with our panelists and answer and ask whatever questions you would like to. With that, thank you again, everybody, for joining, and I hope you all took back home some valuable lessons from this. Thank you, participants. Thank you, panelists, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you, Arpan, for CSW, and thank you, Santosh, for the tech support.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.